a recording of the book A Worm's Eye View of the Stars. I wrote this book with the main purpose of providing my grandson Paul with some sort of idea of how I spent my war years in the RAF. To recreate my experiences, I've drawn on my photographs and diaries, which I kept regularly. Where I referred to bombing targets and such like, I didn't have these in my diaries. I've drawn on a book which is the history of 99 Squadron by Squadron leader Bert Edgley. Chapter 1. Joining up. No vacancies for aircrew, said the man. You'll have to join as a cook or a mechanic and re-muster afterwards. I gulped. Can you use a hammer and a screwdriver? I nodded. Right, said he, we'll enlist you as a mechanic. And so it was that I received my papers telling me to report to Cardington, Bedfordshire on the 19th of April 1940. How did one dress for such an occasion? Clearly one would soon be in uniform, so I settled in favour of an old pinstripe grey suit with paper-thin office shoes, and thus attired, picked up my toothbrush and pyjamas and went to war. What a mistake. The uniform was a long time coming, so we marched around the various departments still in our civvies, between rows and rows of wooden huts, along wet and muddy paths, beneath the shadow of the mighty airship hangars, on and on, as my paper-thin shoes slowly disintegrated and my feet floated in a sea of wetness. Report to be measured for uniforms. Report to pick up knives, forks and spoons. Report to collect uniforms. Report for inoculations. But that's where my troubles began. Within a couple of hours of the jabs, I passed out on my bed and couldn't be roused for the next parade. The sergeant was very distressed. In his world, it was only possible to fall sick at the morning sick parade. Greatly nonplussed, he ruled that I must march to the sick bay. This presented a further problem. Since I was barely conscious, the march was only possible with my arms draped around the necks of others and my feet dragging along the floor. I was admitted at once to sick bay. A hazy week followed, during which droves of medics, grave of mien, visited my bedside, squeezing some bits of me and scratching others with pins. The diagnosis appeared to be meningitis, and during infrequent periods when I came to, it was to find the other patients cowering away from me at the farthest point of the ward and talking in hushed voices. Then great activity, and I found myself transported by ambulance, a long journey, finishing in a bright and cheery ward at the Princess Margaret Hospital, Halton, with views through the windows of the escarpment of the beautiful Chiltern Hills as I drifted in and out of consciousness. Indeed, I feel I owe my eventual recovery to that joyful sight across the spring flowers in the hospital gardens. It seems that my meningitis was not an infection, but a reaction to the inoculation. Even so, it took about a month before I could stagger out of bed. This was at the time of the Dunkirk evacuation, and all walking patients were being cleared from hospitals to make room for the wounded. Staggering, being accounted as walking, I was dispatched with my kit bag on my shoulder to hike the 2 miles to Wendover station. Fortunately, after I'd fallen a couple of times, my companion took pity and took over my kit bag as well as his own. Thus, equally handicapped, we made our way to the train. I recall little of what followed, but I was eventually sent home on a month's sick leave, extended for a further period as I was still not fit. Then back to Cardington, where I became one of the Legion of the Lost. It is strange that the services seem able to cope, however indifferently, with states of normality, but when anything a bit different arises, they're completely thrown. Although stage after stage of new arrivals were being processed in due order at Cardington and sent to their training camps, anyone who had missed the processing of his own group fell into an administrative vortex, revolving forever afterwards in the same circle. The Legion of the Lost, indeed. I really believe that had I not protested and bribed the posting sergeant with a box of 50 cigarettes,